Welcome to More Than Renovating, a renovate and real estate podcast. Our founder, Belinda Smith, talks to industry experts to provide you with the knowledge and information you need to make renovating for love and profit your reality. Belinda will also chat to some of her Renovation Mastery members who are just everyday people doing extraordinary things, following their passions in the renovation and property space. So, let's jump straight into the episode. Enjoy.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Belinda Smith from Renovate and Real Estate, and for today's episode, I'm speaking to Sam Vankan, and Sam is a senior landscape architect in the Brisbane city area. He works for his own company, Veranda Studios, and Sam is also one of my students in Renovation Secrets. And so today is a really casual chat, Sam, about how you got started, like where you're at. And I just know a lot of people are going to relate to your story, Sam. Let's start at the beginning. Sam called me because his mum told him that he had to.
That's pretty much it. Yeah. My mum had actually gone to one of your conferences. I think it was on the Gold Coast back in 2018. She went and she was like, "Oh, I loved it. It was awesome." And I didn't really think too much of it because I was kind of stuck into my career at the time and wasn't really thinking about doing renovations or doing anything by myself at that time. And then I went away overseas, worked in the Middle East over the period of COVID. And then when I came back, I was kind of caught off guard by the current market and just how much everything had changed by why I'd been away. And then I was talking to my mum and she was like, "Oh, maybe we should look at doing something by yourself and maybe look in real estate and look in renovations." And so she said your name and I was like, "All right, I'll give them a look." And I gave you a call and I was convinced pretty much straight away.
All right. So what's beautiful about that is that your mum recognised what I recognise and a lot of people recognise is that you young people are up against it. Like property prices had moved in the time that you were away. We were just talking before this call about the amount of time and energy it's going to take to save for a deposit in a market that keeps marching forward and that gap just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So you started to look with your mum about perhaps doing something together. What have you got in mind?
Was coming back from overseas, being kind of in a place where, like you said, we're kind of coming up against it, being in a market that's really, really pumping. You come back and you go, well, I can't afford basically anything within my vicinity now. So maybe there's another way of going about it. And maybe it's something, instead of going and trying to buy my first home and doing that, maybe I can put it towards a business, flip houses, do landscape and build something up that way. And then later on work into a house.
So your plan is to work with other people like your mum in the first instance, perhaps, or another JV partner to make it easier to get a start. And then after you do a couple, then go out on your own. You'll be right. You just need that little kickstart to get started. At this point, whereabouts would you prefer to do your work?
I've been looking regionally, just so we can possibly get something that's a little bit cheaper on the cheaper side. So we've been looking at Toowoomba area and Ipswich area and all that kind of thing. We're getting down into the research of it now. So we've gone out to Toowoomba a few times now to walk around, get a lay of the land and also talking with some of your trainers like Lauren, and we've been enjoying that, kind of getting out there and seeing everything to do with that. We're just kind of, I think it's going through another surge at the moment. So we're just kind of going, okay, we'll wait and we'll see what's happening. We're kind of honing in slowly as we go along.
Is there anything you're doing to reach out to the real estate agents, or you plan to do to try and get deals before they hit the market?
I think I've been a bit slack with that, to be honest. So I plan to actually solidify that and actually send out proper emails to people and get them on board with me, because otherwise I call them, I send them a text and say, "Hey, I'm really interested in the property that you've got." And then I will get busy with work and I won't have time to answer emails or anything like that. So I got to kind of set up a way of either setting it up so I can answer it straight away or my mum can answer it and help me out.
That's a really good point. We are all busy. There's a lot to do in our lives. Like you're working full time and you're flat out, right? So there's a lot to do. But for real estate agents to take any of us seriously when they're busy too, we need to respond fairly quickly and be ready to roll if they come to us with a really good property that's worth a look. So you bring up a great point. I'll crack the whip, Sam. I'll let you get away with that one. All right. So the whole idea is to secure a property to try and get somebody else perhaps to help you with the finance, either in some half deal, or they do the bank loan, they can fund the renovation, and then you'll split the profit at the end?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's basically what we want to do. And if we do that enough times where we can then hold the deposit ourselves and possibly go through a broker that's not the bank, then we can, build up that way as well. And I think starting out in a regional area, it's a little bit less, not less risk. Well, yeah, I would say less risk, because you're not dealing with a property that's 800,000. You're dealing with property that's probably 350 or less, and then you can kind of build on profit on that. So if you don't make as much as you thought you would, you're not going to lose out, basically.
Agree. There's nothing wrong with cutting your teeth on something that feels okay for you. Obviously, if you're in the bigger price properties, you're going to make more money financially. Most investors do start somewhere between the $300,000 and $700,000 range and make significant profits then, and then move into something when they're more confident. So I think that's a really, really good plan. I'm going to ask you some landscape questions now.
Go for it.
Go for it, he says. All right. When people are renovating, so many of us focus on the inside of the house and getting everything perfect inside, and, thinking about whether there's 2 bathrooms, adding an extra bedroom, all of these little things to add value to a property. What would you suggest to somebody if they're talking about leaving funds available for landscaping? Like, how important is the landscaping, do you think?
I think it's extremely important. I think people forget about it and they just end up doing turf, which is, it's to whoever wants to actually spend the money. But I feel like people are, especially in Queensland, they want to spend time outside. They want to have that connection from the house to the outside area, and they want to feel like, you got to think of it like it's another room within your property, instead of building things with tempered wood or glass or steel or anything like that. You're dealing with making walls with planting, making surfaces with turf or gravel or deco or something like that. And I think you can enhance it by quite a lot just by doing very simple installations of things. But I think it's very important.
Yeah. So how important in selling the dream is the landscaping?
Well, it really depends on how much outside you have. So if you've got a lot, that's basically the entirety of the building. If you've got a property that's got a 600 square block and you've got at the back a few hundred squares or 100 squares, then you've got prime area that's really like, it's kind of like what you've been talking about in all your videos. Like, people are going to walk into that and fall in love with it, based on what is around and what's available. So you have kickabout space for the kids, you have planting areas for people that actually want to do some gardening, all that kind of thing. It's all about the demographic as well. And so you'll base that, your design and what you pick in terms of species and things based on what the demographic you're kind of trying to appeal to. But it doesn't have to just end at the backyard either. It can be the front, it can be your entrance. It can be the thing that brings people in. It can be the welcoming carpet that brings people into the home and makes that huge impact straight away.
If someone's got no idea of what type of plant to choose, is that something that you would help them with, like do the design? How detailed is your design process?
So it depends on what you really want from, like, if someone came to me and said, I want a design for the backyard, it's really about, I would ask you just a series of questions of, okay, well, how much do you want to spend, first of all? Do you want it to be easily maintained? Do you want it to be, because if you want something easily maintained and very little maintenance and just something for the kids to run around in, I would be like, go with turf. Go with something that is easily maintainable and easy to do. But if you want something that's like, I want to entertain, I want people to come around, I want people to be like around the area, I want people to be in the pool, I want people to be al fresco dining outside and all that kind of thing, I'd have to give you a whole spectrum of different things, not just softscape services, but like hardscape, tiling, all that kind of thing.
And would doing a house to flip, where you're just moving that property on and the landscaping becomes somebody else's issue to maintain, compared to doing a house to hold for renters, would you do a different kind of plan? Yeah,
I think I would, especially if you're going with something that you want to sell in an upmarket area. I would definitely think about doing the backyard, just because I think it's going to raise that level. And majority of the houses that I've been to that have got really nice designs, really nice landscape designs in the backyard, they always seem to be just that tier above, or if they are end up being cheaper, they do sell quicker. Just because people like the whole package. They like everything to be complete. They like everything to be there. And some people like turf and some people love gardens. So I feel like people like gardens more because it's something that screens them, gives them a little bit of privacy, makes them feel like they're encompassed in their own world as well.
Creates atmosphere. So much of our lifestyle is outside, is that indoor outside living, that, out to the barbecue, is from the kitchen, the dining, the family room, out onto that back deck. And landscaping can totally change the feel of that.
That's the thing, is majority of architects back in the 1900s, they were the first landscape architects. So it's born and bred out of architecture. It's building space and building rooms that connect between indoor and outdoor. If you are thinking about that, you want to think about how that actually connects into your backyard and how that feels as you walk through it. Is it seamless? Is it something like a transition through the spaces? Is it a change in surface that you want to kind of bring people's attention to and all that kind of thing? It sounds a little bit arty-farty, but that's how we kind of go about it. Kind of like feng shui way of outside and inside living. And you want to create a seamless transition between outdoor living space and indoor living space.
Yeah, and a flow of energy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And because we are in Queensland, we live basically outside. So it's really important.
I agree. The Aussie lifestyle lives outside. Maybe not so much in Tasmania in the winter, but yeah, it's pretty important. When you're talking about allocating spend to someone's landscape design, what would you base that on? On the property value, on the outcome that people want?
That's a really hard question because it's a whole bunch of different factors. It's context, where you are, like where you're sitting in terms of other people's backyards and everything like that. So I wouldn't say to someone to really do up their backyard if they're the only ones in the street with a really nice backyard.
Good point.
Because there's not really any point. I'd say it to them if they were going to live in that place, for sure. But if they were going to flip it and do something with it, and they're the only ones with like an extreme design and everyone else has got turf and the tree, I'd just say, listen, there's some things you can do around the edges, some screening maybe, but I would be very simple about it. But when you get up to those higher end areas, the landscaping and the outdoor areas are kind of a bit more full on. So you will want to spend a bit more money in those areas. But for things on a budget, you can do things on a budget as well. You can make things look really cool and really rustic looking. So instead of using pavers, you use deco. Instead of using, say for instance, you started a build and you're doing all the insides and everything like that, and you want something to be established by the end of when you leave, and you're on a budget. Instead of planting, I'll use pot terms for a second. Instead of planting 300 mil pots, you'd plant 50 mil pots, which are really small. But if you give them 2 months, they'll be a decent size where people will be like, oh, this is pretty established. And they also cost about a third of the price. So you're dealing with something that either costs $15 a pot versus $1.50. And if you're doing the landscaping work yourself, which majority of people can, because it's not super hard, it's just a little bit of labor work and you're planting stuff, then you can do a majority of that cost yourself. It's only when it comes down to laying slab and putting down pavers and building pergolas and everything that it starts to kind of rack up. But even then, you can be very simple with the way you want to do things. You don't go outlandish, because I feel like simple is chic as well.
Agree.
And you want to also, that comes back to the context, is if I was doing something in Toowoomba, I'd go to different houses and see what everyone else is doing as well, and then maybe just simplify it down to a base level of it's fitting the context of where it sits and the people that want to buy here, but it's not that dated look, and it's something that's new and something that will carry on through to the future.
So like with old scrubby plants and stuff, are you a cut them back or rip them out, or that just depends on where they're positioned and what the bush is like? And like, how would you start on a reno?
Depends on the plant. So there's lots of plants that are really dated, I feel. So if you go walk around Brisbane City, you'll see a whole bunch of outside those concrete block buildings and everything like that. There's like crotons and cordyline and everything like that. It's very your grandma's garden back when you were a kid type thing, and it's just very, it doesn't sit well with me. And when people start to do that for their backyards, like I had my friend start to do his front yard like that, and you go, this could have been done just very simply and without all this, because they are expensive as well. That's the thing, because they're an import plant a lot of the time. And so if you want to do something that's actually quite lovely, especially in Australia, use the natives, use the native plants, go to your native nurseries, buy it from there, because you'll get them, one, cheaper, and you also have lots of stock because they grow them. That's where I think we're good at coming in and saying, listen, I know you like this, but there's something that we can give you that similar feel that is a native or something that's going to last longer and is hardy and is going to look really great in a year or two.
So it is about producing something that the buyer is going to like, that is up to date. Because if your landscaping is modern, then it kind of sets the tone for the rest of the house. Like you've paid attention to the rest of the house. So it sets the expectations for people when they're walking across the front lawn into the house. And I think you brought up a really valid question too, is that checking what's in stock. If your landscape, particularly if you're in a regional town, your local landscape garden supplier is going to have product and plants that survive in the area, that sell well and that's popular. So you'll laugh at this. I bought a property in regional New South Wales, gets a lot of frost in winter. It's really, really quite cool and really, really hot in summer. I turn up with my Sydney mindset saying, I'm going to plant these types of plants here because this is what I think, or how I think I should modernise the house. By the time I settled in and had done the renovation and had spent a lot of time on the ground in the community, I realised that what I had in my mind to plant was going to be completely different to what locals will expect, pay for, and also what would survive the winter frosts. And when I talked to the guy in the nursery about it, he laughed at me and said, if you plant those Sydney plants here in this area, they're just all going to die. So I was guided by him.
Well, that's another good point as well. Like it is about climate and where you are at and where you are coming from. And also using the resources as well. If you can go to the nurseries, you talk to those guys because they're very knowledgeable about what's really able to survive. And especially if it's in a local, like a local community nursery, they'll tell you everything because they love plants and they love to deal with it. And so you can talk the ear off them and they'll give you all the information you need about it.
So if people are wondering what to do, they can either reach out to someone like you who's an expert in this, obviously, or if they wanted to try and get some inspiration, where do you think that they should head?
Gardens Australia.
Yep.
Gardening with Angus. They have good resources and they're good magazines, and I don't know if they make magazines anymore.
They'll be online somewhere, no doubt.
They'll be online somewhere, but like those things are really good, and they're slowly becoming, like, they change with the times as well. So it's like fashion, they'll change. It's like architecture, it changes. So everything that's the most in thing right now will be the thing that's come up now, basically. But for me, what I would say is I would stick to natives.
Yep.
Natives of the area. And if you can't stick to natives, stick to something that works within the area, works within the region that you're currently building in or renovating, because you'll get other stuck in those points where you're like, oh, I want to do these trees and these plants, and you find out very quickly that they either lose all their leaves in the winter time or autumn time, and then it just looks like a big stick. and you're dealing with plants that aren't going to be able to survive in the conditions that you've set for it, and they're just going to die, and it's going to look horrible. And then you go, well, I've spent $10,000 on a landscape backyard, and nothing's going to stay good for that period of time. So unless you can sell it really quick, it's for the owner's thing. But I always think that it's always good to have a long-term goal in mind, because then it's going to end up being that down the track you're going to actually enjoy doing it as well.
Yeah, I agree. If you had to name one thing, one landscaping tip that you thought would add the most value to a property, what would it be?
Ooh. I would say don't do turf. don't just do turf.
Don't just think, okay, I'm just going to put grass down.
Yeah, I would say that's majority of what people think.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a reason for that, and that's mostly because of children. But what I've only ever grown up on farms and in houses that have had huge gardens, and my majority of the time I was in the garden. So I've always been around plants and kind of been in the bushes and stuff like that. So I go on bushwalks, and if you think about a kid playing, they love to do that kind of thing. So if you make an environment for them to actually go do that, then it's awesome. So I understand why people do it, and I understand why people do it as well, because it's cheap. But I think if you want to actually build something that's exciting and something that you would actually want to spend time in as well, don't just do turf. Think about a planting plan.
Just take it a step further. Yeah,
Exactly.
That's awesome. Thanks, Sam. Okay, so I'm going to ask you this question before we close. In a perfect world, and this can be you and property or landscaping or business or whatever, what do you imagine yourself doing in the future?
Full-time working for myself, to be honest, and if I can get to a stage where I'm consistently turning over renovation buildings and or even doing developments for myself, that would be my ideal circumstance.
It's my ideal for you as well, Sam. Don't worry about that. Thank you so much for joining me today, Sam. I know that a lot of interested people will be contacting you in the future, and they can do so through your business, Veranda Studios, at samvankan@gmail.com, and the Vankan is spelled Vankan. They're welcome to contact you directly in relation to landscaping design, in relation to doing a joint venture project in the renovation space or property development. I know that Sam's really keen to get started, and he's a good guy, and a conversation is a conversation. Definitely worth contacting Sam directly.
Thanks so much, Belinda. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate the shout out. But yeah, feel free to contact me if you do. And look forward to hearing from anyone that wants to do anything.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Belinda.